While we're waiting to begin, if anyone didn't pick up an annual report, a ballot, review of ministries, or a pastoral search survey, they are out there in the foyer.
One note, the annual report is actually on the pedestals in the back of the sanctuary, not in the foyer. So help yourself.
Yes. All right. Always want to do that. I call this 2024 annual meeting of First Congregational Church of Oshkosh to order. Sue Coghill is graciously filling in for Vanessa Frank, who is out of town, for our town clerk. Our council clerk. Sue, do we have a forum? We have a forum. Thank you. Also, Sue will be taking minutes for this meeting. So when I ask for a motion in a second, and people do that, please shout out your name so that we know and we can record that. That will be very helpful. Let's start off with a prayer.
Let us pray. God of love and grace, we stand on the shoulders of so many saints who've gone before us, those across the ages and those across the generations who made this church possible. As we seek to discern the movements of your Spirit in our church business, guide us in our listening, guide us in our speaking. Keep us rooted in your love for all of creation. We seek to be your people of peace. We seek to be faithful disciples of the one who shows the way. In your Spirit, through your grace, all things are possible. And so we place our trust in you as we go about the business of this church. Come, Holy Spirit, come. Amen.
Amen. All right, a couple more housekeeping things before we get started. Kathy Willie is going to be the parliamentarian of the meeting. Art Willie will be timekeeper when it's speaking time. Jen and Jean will be microphone duty. So again, please speak loud into the microphone. And then Jen and Ginny will be collecting the ballots and counting the ballots. Are there any other roles that I've forgotten? I think we got them all. Okay, first of all, you may have received an agenda, you may not have, but it's up there if you can read that. It's pretty long, we got a lot to cover, but we can do this. First of all, after looking at the agenda, are there any additional items placed that people would like to place on the agenda? If not, I will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda. This is where someone says so moved. Second? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passed. We will adopt this agenda. All right. This is kind of formal, but it's necessary. So bear with us. All right. First order of business is to adopt the minutes from last year, and that you should have received in the annual report. Entertain a, yep. Motion to approve, Jeff, and second? Kim? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried. All right. Let me back up. There's one other thing that I wanted to talk about before we get into this. And I promised Nancy and I did not exchange notes, but I too have a little introduction to the review of ministries document that you should have received up in the foyer. Again, my last thought of for you guys. Again, faith is an individual's belief in God, but church is a community of the faithful to live out God's love for one another. So when we did the review of ministries, we focused on community, and we wanted to understand what community meant to us as a congregation, both in the past, the present, and the future. So the review of ministries, we reached out to as many of the congregation as we could to get your thoughts. So that document is a summary of what our thoughts are, what community means to us. So we can use this going forward in both our pastoral search, and we can also use this at our next joint ministries meeting, which is going to be scheduled for February 29th. So it just kind of gives us a guiding post of what community means to all of us as a congregation. All right. Next, on behalf of Vanessa, I will provide the update. We have, as of this January, 307 members and 110 friends of FCC. Now I'd like to invite Reverend Nancy.
This past year, we celebrated the arrival and baptism of Phineas, as well as Maxwell Tucker Wiegand. I believe Max is the 10th grandchild of Linda and Jeff Wiegand. We celebrate with them. And we welcome 7 members, some in January and some just this past November. Bridget Duffy Ulrich, Christopher Ulrich, Maria and Nick Boucher, Patty Schermetzler, Ben Cook, and I believe, and Jim Paulson, yes. And we all experienced a difficult year. There were so many members and friends of this church who passed from this life into eternity. We have listed those members and friends in the immediate church family. I invite you, as I know you already are, to continue to hold their families in love and prayer.
Next order of business here is just an update, more than just an update, but a proposal from the Governance Task Force. Just a quick background, as many of you know, back in 2018, 2019, there was an initiative to take a look at how our church is governed internally. I call that Task Force number 1. And at that point, the proposal there was to change from a ministry council to a church council. And then COVID hit. There was a little gap in work on the actual task force. We picked that back up again this year. And in front of you are the 10 proposals from the Governance Task Force, which were presented and approved by the Church Council as well. So these are changes, because they're changes to the bylaws, we need to bring them to the congregation for your vote. And that requires 2/3 of the members to approve these changes. So in just a second, Jeff will walk you through each one of those changes on behalf of the Governance Task Force. Just a couple ways we'd like to handle this. We will present each one of these very individually, and then we will open it up for any discussion. And then we'll go to the next one, open up for discussion, open up to the next one, go for discussion. After all 10 are done, we'll ask you to complete your ballot. hand them to Ginny and Jen, and they'll go off and collect them. During the discussion, we would ask to, we're going to limit people's discussion to a maximum of 2 minutes, and then we'll give it to the next person who would like to discuss. If at the end you have more that you'd like to share, then we'll come back to you. But we want to give everyone opportunities to talk. At this point in time, we're not entertaining amendments, so to speak, so no real-time kind of amending things. If you feel strongly enough that you're not comfortable with the change, go ahead and vote no, and that will be an indication that you like the council and the governance task force to go back and reconsider. That's our, like I said, it does require 2/3 ballots, because a 2/3 vote, because it is a change to our bylaws and constitution. So without further ado, Jeff, you want to come up and present each one?
All right. Let's see if we can go through this. The intention is to explain to people the best we can and take any questions, and hopefully people will be informed and feel comfortable making a vote about what we're proposing. Where am I pointing? There we go. The first one, many of these are really easy. The bylaws, the Constitution, people ask, why are we changing the bylaws in the Constitution? Constitution is that overall document that created an organization. It's filed with the state, and it takes into account the general structure and purpose of the organization. Constitutions don't get changed very often, but occasionally they do, especially to make them consistent with the bylaws. The bylaws are your day-to-day operating document. And again, it's a legal document that's filed with the state, and we're required to follow our own bylaws. We do get to change our bylaws, but that's why it takes a 2/3 vote to change it, that a small group can't really change the governance of the church. Many of these are small changes that have just cropped up over the years. Things have changed, and we drop some things off, and then it's a good time to clean things up. This one is relatively simple. I think most people understand the purpose. The quorum up until this time has been 40 people, and today it had to be 40 people. Our recommendation is that it would be 10% of the members of the congregation on the day of the vote. So instead of 40, this used to be a church of 500 people. 40 was easy to get to. Now we're a church of 305 people. 10% would make it 30, which is consistent with what 40 used to look like when we were a 400 person church. So are there any questions about this one?
Any discussion?
Like I said, some of these are super easy. The annual meeting several years ago, a number of years ago, probably 8 years ago, we moved the annual meeting to January. We never changed the bylaws to reflect that, so that this change in the bylaws would simply put into writing what we have been doing, so it's official.
Any discussion? Sue?
Just a comment. We did change it. We voted on it, but we never published it. So when new people came, they didn't know.
So we're voting to put it in the bylaws as opposed to just voting on it.
Any other discussion? Moving to the next one.
Joe, what am I pointing at here?
Point at Joe.
There we go. This is to change the term for the clerk, the secretary of the church council, to a 6-year limit. The moderator-elect, and the treasurer all have 6-year limits. For some reason, we didn't have a limit on the church clerk, and this would just put into effect a 6-year limit on that person's service in that position.
Any discussion? Yep. Okay. Oh, microphone.
Microphone. Kay Sanders. There we go.
Could a clerk serve the 6 terms and then a few years later serve again?
Yes. As could anybody on the church council. There's a lapse, and then you can come back again. But the intention is to bring new people into these groups, and there's new voices.
Any other discussion?
All right, we're halfway through. Eliminate the Teaching and Learning Ministries Coordinator Congregation Relations Committee. This is like a pastoral relations committee, and the pastoral relations committee is a sounding board and support system for the pastor in the context of their ministry in the church. It's a confidential group that gives her honest feedback, her or him, honest feedback. There was a time in the early 2000s we had a Christian education person, and I remember it while I was on personnel, for a number of reasons we thought this was important for that person. That committee doesn't exist anymore, and the need doesn't exist anymore, so we're proposing to strike that out of the bylaws.
Any discussion? Okay.
Number 6. So this is a follow-up on the first one. The Pastoral Relations Committee is a confidential group support system for the pastor. And in our church, unlike most churches, for some reason we had the moderator on that committee, which is a conflict of interest. Because the moderator would be the person who, representing the church, would say to the pastor, we have concerns, or we need to talk about this or that. And being in the confidential conversation, and then being this is really not the right word, but the supervisor for the pastor on behalf of the congregation, that's not the place for the moderator to be. So we're looking to take the moderator off the Pastoral Relations Committee.
Any discussion?
You can keep it going this way. I like this.
Oh, yeah. Question?
Oh. Did I? Was it really important? Did I wipe every... Oh, yeah. This is another one that existed in the bylaws but didn't exist in reality. A treasurer-elect was like a moderator-elect, next person in line. The moderator-elect runs meetings and represents the church in the absence or inability of the moderator. The treasurer-elect, there was just to find somebody who would do it next was the purpose of that. At this point, if we need a treasurer, if the treasurer is resigning or something happens, the church council would appoint someone to that position. It's already hard enough to get people to fill the roles we have, far less somebody that's sitting on the bench waiting for Mike to not do it anymore. I was going to say something worse. Thanks, Christopher. Oh.
Any questions on this one?
Did we take care of this one already? I think so. I talked about it. Okay. All right, this one takes a little bit more conversation. We've had a number of listening sessions and question and answer sessions about it. I'll try to summarize it the best I can. We have, as Toby explained, we've had a number of groups and task forces that have talked about the structure of the church. And the church is a rapidly changing, dynamic organization, not only here in Oshkosh, but the whole world, the country. And COVID has certainly accelerated that. Church participation is down. People's willingness to volunteer to do things is down. And we have a great group of volunteers here, but we don't have as many as we used to have. The bylaws required that individuals served on groups no more than 6 years. And we had some groups that were really frustrated and angry about that. Think of social justice. That I can only live out my faith in this group for 6 years, then I have to go do something else. That didn't make any sense. Yet there are groups in this church that you don't want the same people on there for a lifetime. Think of finance. If you got a group of people that were in the finance committee and started to control the finances of the church because they had been in this so long, you really want some turnover there and new voices and new representation in those groups. So what we have is, cheat sheet. We have coordinating ministries, and these are named in the bylaws. And there's a copy of the bylaws that has markups in it. No, not markups. It has commentary in it that explains what parts of the bylaws were changed. So you can refer to this if you have those or they're online. What we did, instead of naming the groups as they're called today, we said the church shall maintain, and find volunteers and elect people to the ministry groups, whatever they are known at any given time, that cover music and worship, benevolence, children and youth, church growth and engagement, personnel, building and grounds, and finance. So we didn't name the groups, we named the purpose of each group, so we don't have to come back in a few years because building and grounds is now called structure and property or something silly. It's whatever group is responsible for the building and grounds of the operation. These 7 groups, they're called coordinating ministry groups. The church council, through the nominating committee, is responsible to find people to be elected to positions on these groups. They meet no less than 6 times a year. They're elected by the congregation, and they have a 6-term limit being on that group. But as Kay asked, with a lapse, they can certainly come back to any group. Then there's mission ministry groups, and the intention of these groups is that there can be organic groups that grow up in the church. So if we had, this is wishful thinking maybe, but if we had 6 or 8 pregnant people in this church, and they all said that we have a lot in common, and what's it like looking at raising our children in a community where the church is less important, we should have a group for this. That can happen in these new bylaws. New groups can be born, and groups can die a graceful death. This thing that we do now, that we beg somebody to please be on this group, would you please volunteer? If the energy and need is not there, these groups can die a graceful death. So we have the coordinating ministries, which are named in the bylaws: music and worship, benevolence, children and youth, church growth and engagement, personnel, building and grounds, and finance. And everything else that we know generally will become a mission ministry group. They will be acknowledged by the church council as an official part of the church, but they recruit their own people. So if you're one of those pregnant people and you see another one, you look at them and say, we have something in common, do you want to join our group? And if the pregnant people all have their babies and then there are no pregnant people left in the church, that group might die a graceful death until the need exists again. That's a pretty good example I came up with. I like that one. So that would include social justice. We've already talked about that. There's an outreach that works with the homeless shelter that provides meals at the homeless shelter. The green team would come under that. There are many groups that we have right now that would become mission ministry groups. The last group are task forces and committees. They're generally appointed by one of the mission or coordinating groups. Think of the search committee. That's a task force with a specific task. They were appointed by another group. They serve their term. Their term is unlimited till the task is done, and then it's disbanded. Some of them disband faster than others, but task force and committees are appointed by another one of those groups. The intention here is to acknowledge that there are only so many volunteers that are stepping forward, and we don't want to burn those people out by putting them on 2 or 3 groups and saying you have responsibility for this. At the same time, we're trying to make sure that there's good representation of the members of this church in our coordinating ministry groups, those core groups that a church would not exist without them. That does not mean social justice is not important, the green team is not important, or any group is not important, but it's just changing the structure on how those groups are formed. I think that's a pretty close overview on how this works. We have gone in circles on this, and I've been on this task force a couple of times, and we always got stuck on one thing or another that we were afraid somebody would be upset about. But we can't keep doing this and saying, let's talk about it another time. We bring this forward to you believing this is a good plan for today and the church today in this society. So this would be a good time to say, are there questions or comments?
Yeah, and so then just want to remind, Art is going to be our timekeeper, and he will throw up a white card if you have 30 seconds left and a black card when you're done.
Flag on the field.
So go ahead.
All right. Sure, Ann.
I just want to point out and ask a question. I've presented it before to the council, but there is what is called the Memorial Committee, which has been around for a long, long time, but does its work quietly. What that is that when someone dies, often people give money to the church in remembrance of those people, and that money has been in an account for many years, and occasionally we use some of it. It's requested by the church, and we contact the people who donated if we can, but I see none that is not mentioned at all. We are getting less and less of that happening at this point, so the money is not as much as it used to be. And so I think, sent word to the council about that, but just so that you know that is a committee and does work occasionally to take care of memorial monies.
I knew Ann Marshall would be here today, and I knew she would ask that question. So I did a Google search, a search on my document. It is named that the church council appoints committees such as Memorial Committee. So it'd be the responsibility of the church council to appoint a committee to that.
Any other discussion?
Oh, there was somebody over here.
On the third bullet point, it says address volunteer and financial shortage and staffing and funding core groups first. The word core, does that become the coordinating ministries, or what does core group mean?
Yes, I'm sorry, that coordinating ministries.
We'll call it an abbreviation for coordinating.
Any
Anybody
other
else?
questions, discussion?
All right.
Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next one.
Delete the current list of committees nominated by the church council from the bylaws. This is a follow-up from the previous item where we're not naming groups in the bylaws. Those 7 coordinating ministries are named by function, whatever their title may be at any given time, and the others are deleted, but they will be acknowledged annually by the church council that these are official parts of the church. Some things will come and some will go, but healthy churches and healthy organizations allow things to come and go to meet the needs of the church, the members, and the community.
Any discussion on this one? Maria?
I'm just hopefully this really does apply to the thing, but is there, what kind of guidance is on the council? Is there like some sort of guidance that says what is definitely a core, or what did it say? Let's say the committees and things that need to happen and things that are, like, is there guidance for the councils? I mean, if you have people coming in and out, that kind of thing.
So the mission ministry groups, this isn't a matter of whether we think they're important in the life of the church. Social justice, I think, is a good example. It's an important part of who we are as a church. It's a difference in how they recruit and the term limits that they serve. There is no limit on their term limits. It's not named in the church bylaws specifically, but any group that exists now, the intention of the task force, the governance document task force, is that the church council will adopt everything that exists right now. Any of these groups that exist today will exist tomorrow. And that will continue. Committees die a graceful death, that's okay. If the need doesn't exist anymore, the energy's not there, they die. But if new groups rise up, they rise up and the church council acknowledges them.
Any other questions?
What's that, 5, 6, 7, 8? All right, this one we've already done for several years. The way the church council is structured in our current bylaws is you elect four officers in this group, and then you elect a bunch of people to all of our ministry groups. And the church council was technically made up of somebody in each one of the ministry groups that have the second Thursday of the month available, and they showed up at the church council. And so that became the church council. It sounds super representative, but the problem was that church council meetings were consumed by reporting everything each group did. There was no vision, there was no big questions asked, there was no time for any of that because we listened to every single report from every group. And that's not really a healthy way to structure any organization. We need to have an overall vision and a responsible group that looks at the challenges of the church today, and we need to trust all of our ministry groups to do their work. and have good communication lines between the ministry groups and the council, not reporting back to the council every month what they did. What we have done for the last few years, we technically suspended part of the bylaws that said this is the way the church council is structured to allow us to elect people directly to the church council. So the people sitting in this room elected a year ago, elected 4 officers, and then elected a number of other members directly to the council. And you made that decision based on their leadership skills and their thoughtfulness and prayerfulness in leading the church. And then we had all the ministry groups, and they report to the church council and coordinate with the church council. So this change has actually been in place for a couple of years, 3 years, as an experiment, and it works really well. We certainly see some opportunities to continue engagement and collaboration and communication with ministry groups. We do not want them to become siloed, but this thing of the church council was really who's available the second Thursday of the month. Good, you're church council now. And that's not really the way to run a church. So this would put in place technically and in the bylaws what we have been doing for the last 4 years, I suspect.
Any questions on this one? Discussion. Ann?
I talk a lot, don't I? I've been around a long time. This is just a comment. Sometimes things are going on in ministry groups and communities that really is important for all of us to know about, or at least some of us may be very interested in what's happening. And all I would suggest is that we try to find out ways that committees and ministry groups can communicate with each other and with the congregation. I'm thinking, for instance, for perhaps a ministry group we could encourage that each group on occasion publicize in the tidings or wherever what's happening in their group so that the church members know what's going on. That's not to be included in the, but I want some direction or some way to encourage communication so that we do know what's going on as a congregation.
Point well taken. We see lots of opportunities for communication to be improved within the church.
Any other questions? All right.
Number 10. There we go. I'm going to try to tell the history the best I can, but there are others who live this that might be in the room that can add a little bit if they need to. The United Church of Christ was formed back in 1957. So before I was born, the church was born from the Evangelical Reformed Church and the Congregational Church. And I'm looking at Art Willie, who's in the front row, and he would be teaching confirmation class. So I hope I listened really well when I was 14. And these two denominations came together, very different denominations. One was very hierarchical, the ENR Church, and one was very grassroots, congregation-based, which was a Congregational Church. And as misfit as it may have looked, they came together and agreed, we will be together as a church, and we'll be a stronger church as coming together. There were some people in both denominations that were nervous that a new church could somehow take the form of a hierarchical church that told congregations what they had to do. And some of them did not join the United Church of Christ, and some of them stayed in what is called the National Association for Continuing Congregational Churches. Is that right? Did I get that right? So they said, we want to still be, even though the congregational denomination doesn't exist anymore as a denomination, freestanding denomination, we want to stay with our friends who are Congregationalists. And that's fine. They still exist, and there's hundreds of them around the country. In the 80s, and Sue Coghill can correct me if I got this wrong, but in the 80s, our church finally voted whether we were going to join the United Church of Christ or stay with the Congregational Church, even though the Congregational Church didn't really exist anymore. And the compromise they made is, why not do both? We can be members of both denominations. We have roots in the Congregational Church. We believe strongly in what the United Church of Christ is. We're going to do both. And there was a time when I first joined the church, you filled out your pledge card and you actually indicated which one you belong to. I would like my pledges to go to the Congregational Church or the United Church of Christ. That's long since fallen by the wayside. And as churches have changed and denominational structures have changed, the Congregational Church is an association of churches without the kind of resources that the United Church of Christ provides. For instance, we're in a search process right now. The Congregational Church has a website, and you can look there and see some applications, as many would call them, but profiles of pastors. But the United Church of Christ has a consultant that comes in, has talked to our search committee several times already, talked to the church council about what the process looks like, and the prospects. The prospects have changed dramatically in the world we live in terms of how many pastors and applications we're going to get. But they're here to support us along the way, and they have many resources that they can provide, including, again, some of those profiles that pastors who are looking to change. One of the strange things that happened is both denominations, if you call both of them denominations, we're looking at our total membership of about 500 people and assessing our dues based on 500 people. So we were paying full dues to the Congregational Church and full dues to the United Church of Christ. And there was a time we could do that because we had people in this church that paid the bills in different ways than any of us are used to. I was standing in the office one day, late in the end of the year, working on something, and a lady walked in and she said, well, and I can't remember the secretary's name at the time, she said, well, what do we need to finish out the year? And she wrote a check to balance the budget. Those days don't exist anymore. We could pay dues to two different groups because we had people like that could afford to and were generous enough to cover our bills, which insulated us from ever knowing what it actually cost to run the church, because we all thought, look, we raise enough money, we can pay all the bills. That time is gone, and I'm kind of setting this up for Mike a little bit too, because he's going to have this conversation. That time doesn't exist where we can just pay two denominations. About 8 years ago, there was a motion to affiliate with the Congregational Church as kind of like you can be a friend of First Congregational Church without being a full member. And we said we would continue to pay them $500 as a token of our appreciation and acknowledgement of our relationship. And that has dwindled down. We don't have people involved in the Congregational Church structure or committees anymore. We really have become very much a UCC church. And to be clear, the UCC Church, way back in '57, when people were concerned about becoming hierarchical, to be clear, it didn't. The National Church does not tell us what we need to do, what songs to sing, what pastor to call, how to structure our budget, or anything else. We are the church we want to be. We affiliate with other similar churches, and they're churches that are on one end or the other. One, we would say, very conservative UCC churches, and we probably could find some very radical UCC churches, but we come together with different perspectives and live out our faith in this place. So we're looking to say we are no longer part of the Congregational Church, and we are a UCC church, so we'd be striking that wording out of the bylaws.
Any discussion? Questions? Ron, go ahead.
All I can do is give a little history that Carol and Ralph DiBiasio Snyder were hired through the NACCC, and thanks to that organization and thanks to the people names that they put out, when we had our search committee, we looked at people from the NACCC, obviously, because we hired two of them. Mm-hmm. So I think if the $500 still allows us to have more possible candidates in front of us, no matter what their leanings are, who are these people? We need a person or persons to come in here, do a good job, relate to all the needs that are there now, and I think the more you can see and look at, the better off we're going to be. I know my sister has a church that's looking for a pastor. They lost their pastor this year, same time that Nancy was hired. Two of them are gone. Mm-hmm. Another one in the Fox Valley's been looking for quite a while. So, you never know where this nugget will come from. And I would hate to remove something that allows us a little more freedom, few more names that we might mine.
Kathy Willie was the moderator last time we were in a search process, and I just turned to her and asked if she would just say a couple words on this.
I was the moderator when we started the search for Nancy, and we put together the search committee. And part of my job as moderator was to contact both denominations to let them know that Carol and Ralph were retiring and that we would be looking for an interim and a settled pastor. And the response I got from the NACC was, go to our website. And the UCC immediately sent somebody in, worked with us, and we never heard from the NACC after they had once been notified. And I believe if an NACC clergy wants to apply to this congregation, they can do it. There's nothing that says they can't apply. They would be then vetted by the UCC in order to serve here. So it's still open to that possibility, whether we give them $500 or not.
Any other questions?
And clarify, when she says vetted, that really is background checks and making sure they're appropriate to serve in the ministry, not some theological vetting.
Dick?
As a follow-up to Kathy's comments, I was fortunate enough and had the honor of being on the search committee that brought Reverend Nancy here. And to my knowledge, and it was confirmed by Kathy, we had no individual requests from NACCC out of 33 proposals for clergy in our last search for pastor.
The United Church of Christ has close relationships with several other denominations, and without any friction, we could easily call a pastor from another denominations into this. I see this chair of the search committee shaking her head. We could easily call them into this congregation, and there would be a process for anybody that is outside those established relationships. I'm looking at Art as the pastor who taught many confirmation classes.
Any other
Just-
question? Go ahead,
Yes,
Ellie.
if it offers any reassurance, yes, when we post the church profile looking for a candidate, it will go to the UCC, but they draw from 5 different denominations for candidates. So it's the UCC, the ELCA, Presbyterian Church USA, Reformed Church of America, and the Disciples of Christ. So they will be drawing from lots of different denominations.
That's Allie Ford. She's the chair of the search committee. You'll see her on the screen in a little bit. Oh, Nancy.
And just an additional clarification about the search process. The churches, once this church's profile is ready and submitted to the United Church of Christ, that is public information. Anyone can go to the UCC website and find out that this church is looking.
Great.
Right here.
Christopher?
A semantics question. If we discontinue our affiliation with the congregational Christian churches, are we no longer First Congregational Church? Do we undergo a name change?
There are probably 30 First Congregational churches in the United Church of Christ only in Wisconsin, and most of them do not belong to the continuing Congregational Church.
The name does not
The answer
change.
is, yeah, the answer is it will not change. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear. No. It's our roots. It's an acknowledgement of our roots.
What else? All right, hearing no more discussion. Again, because this was approved by a task force and approved by the council, presented to the congregation, and we're allowing the congregation to vote individually on each one. We don't need a general motion from the congregation. What we do need is for you to fill out your ballots, please, and then Jen and Ginny will collect those. They'll go off and tally the ballots, and we'll announce the results at the end of the meeting. So let's just give a minute for that, and we'll move on to the next agenda item. All right, next, let's get an update on the Next Step Together campaign. Jeff?
So this is what was named as a task force and will continue to be a task force, but their task is almost done, so this is probably the final report from the task force. In the bank account, as of January 1st this year, we had $44,000 just in that capital campaign bank account. There's several groups that were included in the campaign, and they were, think of program funds, money that's set aside for them to do creative things, not necessarily in 1 year, but over time. And there's several dollar amounts that are set aside and tagged for those groups. You see those as faith formation, social justice second group, endowment fund. So those 4 will be set aside for the future use of those needs or those specific tasks. The 5th one there says payable to the camps, $2,600. That's just the very last payment we had to them. So we've tagged that money to go to them. Stage screen downstairs, we got the curtain, but we need to order the screen for downstairs. We remodeled all of Fellowship Hall, but forgot to get a curtain and a screen. So that's still tagged, and you approved that at last year's meeting. And then network upgrade, we now, the phones, we stream online, Ring doorbells, wireless, Zoom calls, the network needed to be upgraded to really sustain all of that network traffic and use and dependency on it. So right now we have earmarked $38,718 out of the $44,000, which leaves about $5,571 remaining in the account. There are several people who had outstanding pledges. Some of them are no longer with us or have moved away or circumstances have changed. There are several people that are involved in the daily life of the congregation. We sent out letters to them and asked if they were willing to and able to pay off their pledges. We got a couple of responses from that. If you're one of those people, or if you're not sure you're one of those people, we'd be happy to hear from you. But at this point, we're going forward thinking we'll have something close to $5,000 available after all the projects are done and the money spoken for and set aside for the program funds.
So as Jeff mentioned, this is, I believe, the 6th year of a 5-year NST campaign, and we've done wonderful things. We're looking to close this out and get on to the next thing. So I would look.
We got a question back here.
All right, first question. Yep.
Jeff, I was just wondering if I didn't see it on there. The child care room, was that money?
There's no money. That money was spent in the room. The project is done.
Oh, that was okay.
Yeah.
This is just
this is remaining work.
Still just remaining work to be done. Okay.
So if we have $44,000, we know we have to save $38,000 to finish up some things and to set aside those funds. Last year you approved several really great projects. Last year, the child care room, we had removed the whole first floor of this building except the child care, which was really a striking message about how we didn't value our children, in my opinion. But we also did these screens. Last year, we used to point at this, and this year you've got these great screens, and I'm sitting here looking at that one over there. This is really a top-notch system that served us well in this place. So we did have a bunch of projects last year that are all done.
Any other general questions? Yes.
I was just wondering if any of that balance, if some of it could be earmarked for the elevators that need to be replaced, or elevator, that we're trying to raise money for currently?
So I'm going to hold off on that question with my proposal here. Any other questions? Just general about NST. All right, yes. So to that question, we do have $5,000 left. Option one would be to come back here 12 months later and have another slate of proposed projects and have the congregation vote for them. Option two would be to allow the NST task force to propose and the church council to approve throughout the year to spend out the remaining $5,000. So open to opportunities of requests for how to spend out that $5,000. So I would welcome a motion to authorize the church council to commit any remaining uncommitted funds from NST to projects consistent with the campaign. And again, I would welcome that motion. Kim? Second by Jean. Any discussions about that motion? Sue? Authorize the church council to commit any remaining uncommitted funds in the NST campaign fund to projects consistent with the goals of the campaign. Any other discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried. Thank you, Jeff. Give that to Mike. All right, now Mike Duffy will come up and present the financial reports.
All right, the fun continues. So this does work, right? There we go. Let me just give you an update on the Generosity or Stewardship campaign. As of this date, for 2024, we've received 81 pledges for $593. Now that's significantly less than we received last year. So I've got the last few years listed there, and then also just for comparison, 2014, 10 years ago, we had 128 pledges. Now the good news is the average pledge has actually gone up over the years, but what's disappointing is the number of pledges are down and the total dollar amount is down. But as of today, now we will gladly, even though the pledge campaign technically may be over, we'll gladly take any pledges at any time. So don't hesitate to turn in pledges if any of you have just neglected that or forgotten to do it. We'll also take more money if you want to increase your pledge. You're welcome to do that, or just to contribute. You know, we'll take it whenever you want to give it. But that's the bad news is the numbers are going down both on income and on pledges. Now this is the current budget. I think the details are in the annual report. We're estimating we'll have an income of $247,000. Now, if you look at that, that includes $39,000, which is, let's see, where is that on there? Yeah, there is, from our investments. We decided several years ago that we were obviously needing money from our investments to cover the budget deficit, and we're actually budgeting 4% of the general fund to go to cover expenses. We also take 4% out of the permanent opportunity, 1/4 of the permanent opportunity fund, which is the money that came from Nancy Norgard. And that money, 4% of that quarter of the account is also included in that $39,000. So approximately $30,000 comes out of the general fund's interest, and $9,000 comes out of the permanent opportunity fund. So that amount of money we think we can afford to do every year, probably indefinitely. So that's a safe amount of money that we can take out of our investments. The problem is the unsafe part is the bottom line. If you look at our expenses, we actually spent less this year than we budgeted. So our actual expenses in 2023 were $338,000. We budgeted $362,000. A lot of that was lower personnel costs, just people that were not working as many hours as we had allowed. So we overestimated how much our expenses would be. So we actually spent less money last year than we expected. Yeah, and our income was less. If you look up higher, you can see that we received less income than we expected. Our pledges, people do a fairly good job in this church. Maybe 95% of the pledge money is collected, but there was a little less than was not collected. And if you look at the bottom, the very bottom line, and there's more on this in another slide, you can see that we budgeted last year that we would have a $71,000 deficit. It ended up being a $59,000 deficit. So on top of the $39,000 that we took out of our investments, we had to take an additional $59,000 basically out of our savings account to pay the bills. Now, the really bad news is in 2024, that number is now up to 129,000. So if we did a good job budgeting, which we may or may not have, and a lot of times this is an estimate of spending. It's hard to be accurate with a budget when we're depending on donations. But right now, as of the time the budget was approved by Church Council in December, that number stood at 128 or 129,000. Now, this is looking at that deficit, and you can see that now if you add the 39,000 to the deficit, and you can see the total amount of money we would have to take out of our savings account, $168,000 compared to a couple years ago. So that's going up every year. So right now, as it stands, if the budget is accurate, we might have to take as much as $168,000 out of our savings account to pay for the bills. I told you this would be fun. This is our investments. This is the good news. Is I think if any of you have a retirement account, you know that it was a good year in the stock market, or just follow the news. Our investments did well this year. We invest through the United Church Fund in a moderately, is considered a moderate fund. It's not a highly risky fund. And if you look at the total, no, there's an error on this slide. The last column should say December of 23. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. But the last column is basically how much money did we have in our investments. Now, you look at the total, and it shows around $2 million. And the good news is we have about as much now as we did at the beginning of the year. But if you look at the top number, that's really the more important number. That's the general church fund, because we have a lot of dedicated funds. And these are funds that families have said there's certain restrictions on, or you as a congregation or church council has restricted. So not all of the money that we have invested is available. For example, the permanent opportunity funds that were created after Nancy Norgard's donation, that money has all been restricted. We take $9,000 out of that to pay for the deficit, and $9,000 out of it to pay for building expenses, which right now is going to the boiler replacement. But we really only have in the general church fund $811,000, and actually it may be slightly less than that because there is some money in there, maybe $20,000 or $30,000 that's really also set aside for some other things. But if you look back at the previous slide, we have a $68,000 deficit and $811,000. If I can get the slide, there it goes. $811,000 in our general church fund. So I think that's it. So I'll take questions, but obviously the concern, and I think this is going to have to be. I'm going to go too far. This is obviously something that I'm not happy about. Church Finance Committee is not happy about it. Church Council is not happy about it, and it's something that I think is going to have to be addressed. Oh, one thing I wanted to clarify too, because if you look, the two numbers at the, if you look here, pledge contributions when we put the budget together have 190,000. So the good news is actually we already now have $25,000 more in pledges than when the budget was put together. So that you can, the bad news is probably can be reduced by about $25,000. But it's still a lot of money, and it's just not sustainable. If you knew that, if any one of us knew that we were spending money at the rate that we have to take our savings out, we would do something different. So obviously I think the church has to be, the church council and you, the congregation, should be worried about this and moving forward. I'll take questions though.
Question here. Jen she's counting ballots, so if you could.
Could you please tell me who's going to win the NFC Championship game tonight?
I don't have a slide on that, sorry. I think, I'm hoping that everybody outside of San Francisco is pulling for the Lions. So, yes, well, that's another projection. Any serious questions? Do we need a motion to approve this?
Yeah,
financial?
I'll ask for that in a second, yeah. Any other? This is hard, talking about money, talking about the sustainability of our church, but we have to have this conversation. So, church council, all of us need to be ready to tackle this. And we can get through it somehow, some way, but change is required. Don't know what that change is, but we need to build our sustainability for our grandchildren, right? So this church survives. So anyways, more to come. Church council is one of the number one things that we need to be tackling as we start the new year. Allie, did you have a question? No. Okay. With that, I would entertain a motion to accept these financial reports. Christopher, second. Kim, any more discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting reports, say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried. Mike, thank you. Now we'll have Pat come up and Nancy leave. And again, for those who are new, every year, approving next year's pastor's compensation is a congregational decision. So the Personnel Committee has a proposed compensation package, and Pat will walk us through it.
Okay. When a pastor is called to First Congregational Church, their benefits and compensation is set forth in a call agreement. And that's the legal agreement between this church and that pastor. From that initial compensation document, any increases after that are recommended by the Personnel Committee. And the Personnel Committee generally uses the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics Annualized Consumer Price Index. And we do that in August to set forward for the next year. And it has been our practice to use that and recommend that amount for the pastor as well as the rest of the staff. For 2023, that amount was 3.7% increase, and that's what we recommended to the Finance Committee for the pastor and the staff. Ministers, you can see in here, are required by IRS to pay their own FICA, Social Security, Medicare, and it's historically been that First Congregational Church offsets that with our pastors by providing them that in additional compensation. And so those are the two numbers that increase the base salary. Again, that starts out from the initial call report, and then this is how it is built year to year. Jeff had talked about the United Church of Wisconsin Conference, United Church of Christ, and they do provide us with guidelines in compensating our pastors to be sure that we're providing the best that we can to our pastors. And First Congregational Church, I'm happy to say, has always been at least at the minimum of those recommendations. So these are the numbers then for 2024.
With that, I'll entertain a motion to accept the pastoral compensation package. Karen, motion. Anyone second? Ann. Any discussion? Oh, we got one here.
Just a moment.
Yep. Go ahead.
What percentage of this, or how do you come up with what you're going to be paying any interim pastor?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
The question was, what's the process? How do we know how much we pay interim pastors? She's not, you're referring to once Nancy retires and if there's interim?
Yes.
I'm trying to, in between the lines here, yeah. Do we know the process or the amount that we pay interim pastors, and how is that calculated?
That again is a process that goes through whoever will be looking at the interim pastor, and I think at this point we're looking not to have an interim pastor, but to try to go directly to a new settled pastor. But if we do need to do that, there'll be a task force set up that will look at it. And again, most probably they will use the Wisconsin Conference United Church of Christ in trying to determine what is available to us and then how much is needed to compensate that position. We have built into our budget for the year 1 month of overlap from when Pastor Nancy might leave until we have somebody else. So we did build 1 month into the budget for this year.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next question. I think it's Kay, yeah.
Well, I just wonder, is the new pastor going to be paid this amount, or is that a whole nother process?
It's really a whole nother process, and that, again, I referenced the call agreement that we, when we get a new pastor, and that's what Ellie and her group will be working on, and they will use many of the same things that we've used in the past. What are the compensation levels that are required, and using benefits from the United Church of Christ or any other that they can find, and finding what's available.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I will, all in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried. Can I have a volunteer to go get Nancy? Keegan, I think, is getting, thank you. Okay. Thank you, Pat.
Okay, you need this?
All right, at this point, Cynthia will come up and present the 2024 nominations.
Tell Nancy it was approved. Nancy's back. Tell her. Announce that.
Nancy, you're still with us. Yeah.
Before we consider the nominations for 24, I'd like everybody to stretch by waving their hand and let me know that you served in some aspect on a committee, sang in the choir, you worked in the kitchen, you did something in fellowship, just to show how much volunteerism we have. Now put your hands together and clap, because we thank you. Your church thanks you. We're so glad. Now, can I move this ahead? Okay, this is the list of nominations, and as you see, we are short in several of the groups, but we're happy that we're solid in others, so we're very grateful for all of those who are willing to step forward and serve. And once again, for those of you who waved that may be taking a break this year because you've been serving for a long time, we want to thank you as you step back a bit and decide what kind of interim projects or what other kind of task force you might step up to, but not engaging in a long-term ministry group. So I want to thank you for that. So Toby, I think everyone, can you see the list okay? Do you want me to read them? You're good? That one's a little small compared to some of them. It has more names.
It is a little small. And again, we have this list as a proposal, not knowing if the proposal to change the ministry group structure passes or approves. So if there's any question of why we're presenting this and presenting the other proposal at the same time, we just didn't know.
Okay, I thought it was on the agenda, so I was hoping everybody had one of those. And
all right.
So Toby?
I'll entertain a motion to approve the nominations for the 2024 ministry groups. Ginny? Ginny, and then second? Maria. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried. Next.
The next group is the Proposal Church Council. Our members are Kathy Willie, Sue Coggill, Emily Propson, Pat Blades, Mike Edis, and Liz Caprillion.
Look for a motion to approve. Ginny moved. Kelly seconded. Any questions? Discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carried.
And I'd like to thank the two retiring members that are leaving at this time. We have Sarah Yashub and we have Jim Hoffman, who stepped back about a month ago. We certainly appreciated their service. And here are the proposed officers. Cynthia Thorpe, moderator. Jeff Pullman-Becker, moderator-elect. Vanessa Frank, church clerk. And Mike Duffy, treasurer.
Look for a motion to approve the officers. Jean, motion. Second? Allie. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And any abstentions? Motion carried. Thank you. Cynthia.
Thank you. And a reminder, we do add people all year long to our church groups.
All right. Last on our agenda then is an update on the Pastoral Search Committee. So I'd like to introduce Allie Ford. Thank you for leading us through this effort.
Good morning. I just wanted to take a minute this morning to introduce the members on our committee and to just give you a quick overview of what this process is going to look like and what you can expect from us as a committee. So I'm Allie Ford. I'm the chair of the committee. I moved to Oshkosh about 11 years ago with my husband Mike and our two kids, Charlie, who's now 14, and John, who's 12. We moved here when Mike got a job as a professor at UWO. We found FCC shortly after arriving here and have been members for almost 10 years. I work as a nurse practitioner in the community, specializing in geriatrics and addiction medicine. And in my free time, I enjoy gardening, knitting, and walking our beautiful city. We have Stacy Otto. She's not here this morning. Stacy is a mom of two adult daughters, Ellen and Alice, who both grew up in FCC. She works as a mental health therapist and consultant for Catalpa Health, a children's mental health agency, and she specializes in infant and early childhood mental health. In her free time, Stacy enjoys reading, yoga, taking walks with friends, and being in nature. Stacy's grateful for this opportunity to be on the search committee and discern God's plans for FCC's next chapter. We have Chris Bagans. I don't believe she's here either this morning. Chris has lived and worked in the Oshkosh area for nearly 25 years, and she and her wife Amy have been attending FCC for about 20 years. During their time at FCC, they've served on a few ministry groups, and Chris is honored to be part of the team. We have Jim Paulson, who is here today. If you want to just say hi. Jim is married to Franny Paulson, and they have lived in Oshkosh since January 1984. Jim's a retired professor of chemistry at UW Oshkosh. He's been a friend of FCC since the 1980s and a member since 2023. He's been on the music committee and on the adult education, now lifelong learning committee. We have Ginny Shearer, who's here this morning. Ginny's a retired social worker, having worked 30 years for Winnebago County in child protection and foster care. Following her retirement from the county, she worked part-time for FCC for 7 years as the Nurture Ministries coordinator. During her tenure, she was involved in starting and leading the Stephen Ministry. Ginny now serves on the Benevolence Ministry Group. She's married to Dick Olschlager. She is interested in photography, birds, and carves bird feathers out of wood. We have Erin Capralian, who has been a lifelong member of FCC. She currently lives in Milwaukee, but attends in person when she can and online the rest of the time. We have Barb Ziblet. I believe she's here. Oh, she just left. Okay. Barb's been a member of FCC for approximately 15 years, coming from the First United Methodist Church on Linwood. Stan and Barbara were drawn to FCC by the ministry of Ralph and Carol. In her years at FCC, she's been a member of the Handbell Ensemble, a choir member, part of the music ministry group, and has helped with the nursery and church school. Barb's looking forward to our collective work as we seek and find our next pastor. Then we have Nick Schneider, who I don't think is here. Nick and his wife Shannon have been attending FCC since moving to Oshkosh in 2008. They have a daughter, Aurelia. Nick teaches agriculture at Fox Valley Technical College. And then we have Zach Rogers. Zach was baptized and confirmed by Carol and Ralph here at FCC. He was proud to let us know that Val taught him how to knit. And he has earned a master's and works in accounting. He enjoys traveling. And then we have a consultant, a youth consultant, who is Charlotte Steltflug. Charlotte lives in Omro and has been part of the FCC family since she was born. She's been active in FCC's youth group, and this year she's a senior at West High School, where she's busy participating in orchestra on violin and serving as president of student council. She's also a member of the Oshkosh Youth Symphony, and we're fortunate to have her as a consultant. So that's our group, and we wanted to let you know that we will be keeping you updated throughout this process, so look for our logo. You can see it up there on the screen. Ginny did an awesome job of preparing that for us, so watch for that in the tidings, as well as Member Bridge, if you're looking for an update on what's going on. We'll also have a poster that you may have seen out in the narthex. That's just a checklist letting you know kind of where we are in the process. So a brief overview of what the process looks like, as we kind of talked about throughout the meeting today. Our first charge is to develop our church profile. That profile will then be posted with UCC ministry opportunities online. From there, we will receive any interested candidate profiles, after which we will participate in discernment and interviews. And when we have found somebody that we feel the Holy Spirit is calling us to be with us, the congregation will then meet this person on a call Sunday, and there will be a congregational vote to determine if that is indeed the person who will be with us. And so one of the other really important things I wanted to let you all know about today is we will need your help in this process, especially in building our church profile. Luckily, we did have a recent appreciative inquiry done and the ministries review that was recently done that gives us a lot of great information about our community. But we are asking you to complete a survey to let us know about the characteristics that you are looking for in our next leader. And so they did hand out a paper copy of that survey today. There will also be a link to it online that'll be coming out in Member Bridge, and it was in Tidings, I believe, as well. The other thing to look for is Ginny has put together a very detailed letter that will be in February Tidings that goes through the process I just described very briefly in more detail. If you're looking for more detail, you can also talk to any of us on the committee if you have questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Allie. So we got the results from the governance changes ballot, and they They all passed, but let me share with you, we had 65 votes total. Some people voted yes, some people voted no, and there were some abstentions. So I'll just go through the number and the number of votes of yes, just to communicate kind of how this went. Of number 1, 63 votes yes. Number 2, 62 votes yes. Number 3, 61 votes yes. Number 4, 61. Number 5, 60. Number 6, 59. 7, 63. 8, 61. 9, 62, and 10 was 61. So all 10 of the motions carried. Any questions? All right, then at this point, I'm going to hand the gavel over to Cynthia, and she will call for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Stay here a minute. I would just like to, on behalf of the church council, and I'm sure on behalf of all of you, we have decided to give a little thank you of our gratitude. You've led us so wonderfully for the last 2 years. It's been a pleasure mentoring with you and serving with you. So here's a little something I hope you and Jen will enjoy. As you see, there's sort of a little hint about it already, but it's a gift certificate to have some fun up in Door County. So
it's a picture of Cynthia's cottage. Thank you very much.
And some spending money.
Thank you.
Here, you got to take the bag too. You
Thank
don't
you.
get away without the bag.
Okay. There you go.
So it's been a pleasure serving with the entire group, and on behalf of First Congregational Church,
We pray first.
We pray first, yes, you're going to pray first.
Okay.
I think it's stronger if you pray first than praying after.
Then we're done. I actually invite you to rise. You've been sitting for quite a while. And I invite you to take another deep breath. And let us pray. Holy mystery, God of grace and blessing, we stand in awe of all the ways you have loved this church, all the ways you have and continue to love the world through this church. We look to you for guidance, for strength, for wisdom, for joy. Guide us in these next days, months, and years so that we might indeed be your people, people of extravagant welcome, abundant generosity, and unbounded love. In your name we pray. Amen.
Annual meeting adjourned. Oh, wait, we have to ask for a motion to adjourn?
She needs a motion to adjourn. Christopher.
All in favor? Well, who was the motion?
Christopher moved.
Okay.
Do I have a second? Maria, second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourn.